Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are here to explore why water is not just water. My name is Michael Mascher, and I'm here based in the US. And joining us from Paris will be Elena Berg. She is a professor for environmental science at the American University in Paris. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and to have a conversation with you over several episodes, I hope, about the environmental impact of bottled water and other questions about fine water.
Great. So can you give us a little bit of a background how did you come up to the moment of, that we engage here and sitting here in a conversation about water?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and it's an unexpected story. So I didn't have a life plan to become an expert in water or to kind of go in this direction. My background is actually in anthropology. So I have a master's in biological anthropology where I focused on primate behavior, so the behavior of monkeys and lemurs. I did a lot of field work where I traveled all over the world working with different species. And then I did a PhD in animal behavior at UC Davis. So I was working at that point in looking at social behavior, so the evolution of social behavior in different kinds of animals, and worked specifically with a bird in Costa Rica, looking at its social behaviors. So I didn't come into this with that specific background, but I found a position at the American University of Paris. This is a liberal arts institution that thinks across many disciplines in everything that we do. And I realized that even though I've become an evolutionary biologist, I've worked with primates, I've worked with birds. Before I came here, I was working with beetles, and I now have a population in this lab where I am here, a population of seed beetles that I study, trying to understand the evolution of behavior. So I came at water in part because I'm at this liberal arts college where we're teaching across disciplines, and I happen to be in the Department of Environmental Science. Well, it's the Department of Math, Computer Science, and Environmental Science, because we're a small place where all of us are housed together. And one of my jobs is to tackle questions about environmental science. So I basically trained myself to be an environmental scientist on top of my background in social behavior. And one of the big questions that comes up all the time with my students is about the bottled water industry and about ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint. So that's kind of where we come into my interest in water.
I have a similar background, but different pathway. I'm also an anthropologist. I was a professor for visual anthropology at USC, University of Southern California, for a while. I call it in a former life. At the university, I discovered that I like money, and we started a couple of software companies. And only in 2002, I discovered water, and it was almost by accident. One day I didn't feel too well, and I went to my cardiologist, and the cardiologist basically gave me a choice. He said I could continue drinking alcohol or I could live. I had a wine collection of about 500 bottles at home, so I hesitated a little bit. But together with my wife, I think we made the right decision, and I eliminated alcohol from my life. What that means is, and if you drink alcohol, if you're interested in wine, it's not only to get drunk through the alcohol, you're really interested in experiences, sharing with friends, the bottle on the table, discovering new things. And this bottle was suddenly removed from my experience, and I looked around and was looking for something else. And if you remove the wine bottle from the table, there's only one other bottle left on the table, and that's water. So what I did, I focused my Epicurean curiosity away from the wine onto the water. This was in 2002, and for the next 6 years, no one was talking to me, because this was a total crazy idea that water has character, water can be matched with food, water is not just water. It was a laughable idea. Only slowly in about 2008 or so, it started becoming a trend. And right now, as you know, everyone knows that water is not just water, and that will be the topic of our podcast here. And it's really fascinating to me to be at that point here and together with Martin Riese, 2 years ago, we started Define Water Academy. We're training now water sommeliers from around the world. And about a year ago, we had one really, really interesting candidate inquiring to become a water sommelier. And this was Elena from the American University in Paris. And of course, because of our similar background, we immediately connected. And with her environmental background, we said, well, maybe we should tackle a big subject from a scientific and a very broad base and really try to solve something. So what this is here is not a final product. This is a process of two people talking and exploring the possibility and putting some foundation under the concept of why water is not just water.
That's exactly it, that I came to this academy, and what was immediately clear to me was the passion that you and Martin had for water. And I didn't understand that at first. I think I came at it more because I had this environmental perspective and I wanted to understand, I guess, the industry from the inside. I wanted to understand what drove people to care about this part of the industry that I actually didn't even know about before, maybe a year before that. I didn't realize there were fine waters from small companies that were producing really interesting, dynamic products. I didn't know about that. What I saw, what I heard with my environmental science background was, well, there are these big evil companies that take this stuff and they put it in bottles, and that this is something we needed to fight against. So I think I came at the sort of whole topic of water from a fairly narrow perspective, because I didn't have the background yet to understand that it was more complex than that. The other way I came to it was through my environmental science class. I teach several environmental science classes, but one of them, I was looking for a lab to do. I had originally planned a computer lab where the students had to analyze climate change temperature data over several class periods. And I had done this lab before, and the students, they appreciated the first one, but the idea of doing a second and third one just made me feel ill. And I knew that the students needed something different that could really help them understand the scientific method and how scientists come up with questions. So I devised, sort of at midnight, the night before my class, I devised a lab on water tasting, on bottled water tasting. And it was a simple, non-blind, blind experiment. So this combination of setting bottles out in front of the students. They had name recognition, particularly in Paris, where people often drink specific brands of bottled water that they love, whether that's Evian or Volvic or whatever their particular tastes are. I set those out in front of them and I asked the students to taste those waters and then rank them. And then I gave them the exact same waters in a beaker, basically with no ability for the students to see what they were tasting. And I found that suddenly there was a confusion with what water was what, and that often they were ranking tap water higher than they did when they knew that it was tap water. So this became this question for me of, okay, well, taste is this interesting question. Like, it seems like when you just give people blind taste tests of waters that are of similar mineral content, they can't tell the difference very well. So what does this mean? And I actually put my head together with a professor who was here at AUP, but is now at CSU Fresno, Kevin Capehart, who writes about the economics of bottled water. And he and I decided to run an experiment where we did a formal taste test with this category that I'd never heard of, so this fine water category, because he's interested in the economics of these smaller business models with lower production and higher price points. So we put together this whole taste test, and it was a lot of fun. It was fascinating. We ended up publishing it in the Journal of Wine Economics. And it made me also skeptical, but also curious. So it was my introduction to this fine water world, but it was also on the heels of having shown that it was hard to tell the difference between waters. So I came into this whole question about water with skepticism. And I didn't plan to go this route. I don't know if you recall, Michael, but when I first inquired, I just wanted to do one of the short courses because I just felt that I needed more information. I didn't see myself becoming a connoisseur. And you encouraged me to take the full course. I think you recognized that curiosity in me and maybe our shared academic backgrounds. And you really encouraged me to dive in. And I just had a really good time. And I started to get a bunch of waters. Paris is a wonderful place to be. There's a tremendous variety of water. I started to taste the difference. I started to understand the impact that these different flavors had on me. And I started to dig into what I think is a really complicated question, which is why has bottled water become such a contentious product? Can we break that down a little bit and understand why it's so contentious? Can we see a way forward where there isn't a blanket statement about all bottled water is evil or against the environment or a waste? And I think really coming into this as a skeptic and as someone who didn't really understand what the fuss was about, I've really been grateful for this opportunity to see that this story is actually much more complex. And in fact, I see an opportunity here for these small producers to have a voice about the environment and to actually play a really positive role in protection of water resources, in making people aware that water is exciting and interesting and varied. And I think you've heard this, this perspective all through my essays that I was writing for the course, all of my I really wanted to get into this question of not shy away from the conflict, because I think just saying, the people who are opposed to bottled water are wrong, I don't think they are. I think in many cases they're absolutely right. So it's this question of why is the controversy there? Where does it come from? Again, an interdisciplinary background. I want to think about the behavioral aspects of this, like what drives humans to have not only seek out these Epicurean pleasures, but to also team up on one side or another of them. How has water come to represent so much more than a consumer product or something that we can have alongside wine at the dinner table? So I think that's, in a nutshell, what this series is about. I feel like I've been kind of relentless about it because I feel that it's an unexplored, untapped way to move forward with these questions about the environment and bottled water.
Yeah, and exactly what Elena described here is the problem we have from inside the bottled water industry. We know we have a fantastic product. We want to give people experiences. They see new things, but water is just considered water. Every water in a bottle is a bottled water. And what we've done with the Academy, with Fine Waters, and what Elena just describes is that things are a little bit more complicated than that. Every time you think you have a quick solution, it's probably the wrong solution. If you dig deeper, things become much more complicated. And exactly as Elena described, we want to dig a little bit deeper and see, is there a differentiation between the different waters? They come maybe from different places. Is every water really the same? And applying that principle and see what does it mean for our perception of bottled water. And again, having our anthropological background, we will dig deep into evolutionary biology. We will have some really interesting discussions. What is it that interests us as Homo sapiens so much with water? Why are we so passionate about the water and not so much about tomatoes? And I find it also really interesting, your take on the skepticism, that you start out with skepticism and then you start digging deeper, you're open-minded, you dig deeper and you discover something. And I think that's a really, really good scientific process, and a process that we would like people to consider is, don't say no immediately, look a little bit deeper, listen to us and see if there's something there that can maybe differentiate your point of view about water a little bit more. And at the end of the course, Elena, of course, graduated as a water sommelier, and you probably haven't received it yet, but I've put a pin in the mail, so very soon you should see a pin. And next time, hopefully, you can wear your pin And that indicates that you're really a water sommelier. But yes, exactly the problem that you described is the thing we want to tackle here. And maybe we should start by giving you a little bit of an overview what we want to do. This is the introductory here. We will dig deeper in many chapters, but maybe we should quickly talk about the different types of water, and we can go down a list here and see the different waters. And then we give you an introduction of each of the chapters. We have, I think, 12 chapters in total. And that hopefully makes you come back and listen to us more, digging deeper into each of the topics.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that, Michael, is that this came out of a conversation that we had where in my academic setting, I imagined writing a scholarly paper about all of these things I've been reading. So I've been essentially, since the confinement period started, I've just been devouring everything that I could find about water, whether it's Roman aqueducts or the drinking water pollution problems, whatever it is, I've been trying to get my hands on it. And I came at this with, okay, I want to consolidate everything that I have been thinking about kind of in collaboration with someone in that world, so that we can kind of tackle this question together about why water is controversial, why people have a hard time seeing water as something that has different flavors or personalities. And then also, I think my imagination was that we would start with a scholarly paper, and then perhaps once we had published this scholarly paper, we could then refer to the scholarly paper in conversations with the public, with other people. And you pointed out that, in fact, there's another way to do this. You can have the conversation first, where you invite people to ask questions, you invite people to be part of our inquiry about all of this. And maybe that can lead you to a product that then at the end of the day is much richer, because you enter into this with a question rather than a statement, right? So I think we share this desire to ask questions and try to make sense of things. Ideally, at times with other people. So we'll have guests as well who may weigh in with their particular perspectives. But what we want to emphasize is that this isn't a finished product. This isn't us telling the world how they should think, but it's both of us recognizing that this is a really complex topic. It brings out very strong emotions that are very different depending on people's perspectives. And rather than saying that one person is right and the other person is wrong, what I'd like to do is just dive into that conflict, I guess, and talk a bit more about that, sort of in addition to just providing an introduction about water and why water isn't just water.
Very good. Yes, absolutely. Forgot to mention, yes, this is a process. This is the process of writing the paper, and we invite other people to join us in that process. And I think it's an interesting way of doing this. And with Zoom and all this kind of technology, it's really easy. It's more communicative. So water is not just water. So why is water not just water? There is natural water and there's processed water. We will talk about this. Some water comes from a spring, is a natural product. Other waters come from a factory. And it's very different things. Both things end up in a bottle, and most people consider both things bottled water.
Yes, Michael, you mentioned that there are different kinds of water, that water can be natural water or made in a factory. But I think it's also important to point out that water comes from different sources and comes in different forms. So water can come from wells that have been dug, where water is lifted up mechanically. It can be water that's been under pressure, like an artesian spring. You can drink water that's rainwater from icebergs, glaciers, the clouds. And at the same time, water can come in different forms. So water that has different mineral content that can affect flavor, waters that may be different pH, or some waters are carbonated and others are not. So all of these things affect flavor, showing right there that water is not just water.